over 70%, listen to this number now, and get your pens going. Over 70% of America's inmates cannot read above a 4th grade level. Now do you see the correlation? If students are failing by 3rd and 4th grade, if they're likely to drop out of high school because of the lack of reading skill by 3rd grade, is it any wonder then that 70% of inmates cannot read above a 4th grade level? It should be no surprise. The link between crime, poverty, and illiteracy is undoubtable. Can you doubt that link? Do we need further proof? Do we need more information? Do we need more statistics? No, we don't. We don't. We need to act on what we already know. Now, if that's true about inmates in the system, let me give you one more stat that blew my mind when I read this. Nearly 85% of those in the juvenile justice system are considered to be functionally illiterate. Look, here's what I'm saying. When you fail in school, when school leads to failure, the next step is often for kids involvement in the criminal system and then jail. They go from failing to jailing. And we don't need any more people, sociologists, to tell us, oh, we know it's a tragedy. If you fail in school, your chance of succeeding in society is dismal. The numbers are staggering. And if by now you're not moved by these numbers, then I don't think you have a heart or soul. Maybe we've seen them enough. Maybe we've heard the numbers enough that we're jaundiced. We don't feel anymore, maybe. But when I teach, I look at children, the last thing I want to think about is that those little children in 3rd grade can end up in the juvenile justice system. It ought not to be. We ought to be seeing them at graduations. We ought to be thinking that's the next mayor. That's the next governor. That's the next scientist. That's the next president. That's how we ought to be thinking. How do we end up going from 3rd grade to the juvenile system to jail? All because reading didn't happen. The kids didn't get the skills they needed. So people often ask me, what's the number one cause of illiteracy? Why do 90% of high school dropouts end up on welfare? What's the number one cause that ties together crime, poverty, and literacy? What's the cause behind illiteracy? And I would say the primary cause, and statistics will bear me out, the primary cause is dyslexia. You've heard of it. Everybody talks about dyslexia. People talk about a lot of things. What does it mean? What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is not what you think. Let's start off with what it is not. Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. You know, people often say, oh, they're just dyslexic. They can't learn. It's not true. Many of the heads, the CEOs of Silicon Valley are dyslexic. So dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. What is dyslexia? If it is the primary cause behind reading failure in school, and if reading failure is the primary cause of illiteracy, which leads to crime and poverty, we need to understand what dyslexia is. And I start off by saying it has nothing to do with a child's intelligence. We need to stop that right now. People say, oh, they're dyslexic, they can't learn. It's not true. Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is simply a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. Some glitch in the phonological circuitry of the brain makes it difficult for many children to read. You know, our brains were not wired to read. We spoke. For thousands of years, men just spoke. Mankind just spoke. Women just spoke. Children just spoke. But with the invention of writing, about 8,000 years ago, then came the necessity for reading. From the Sumerians to the Egyptians, later on the Chinese, and later on the Phoenicians and the Greeks and the Romans, as writing became a reality in civilization, the necessity to read became a reality. But that meant that our brains had to be rewired to read. And for some children, there's what I call a glitch, what scientists call, not what I call, what scientists call a glitch in what we call the phonological processor, the sound processing mechanism. There is no reading part of the brain. The brain has to be rewired to read. And if the rewiring is not done properly, hear me, if the rewiring is not done when they are little children, but you know, the brain forms by 5, almost an adult brain, by 5 years old. And children's brains need to be rewired to read. And it needs to be done consciously. And it needs to be done deliberately. And it needs to be done systematically. And it needs to be done scientifically. We can't guess at this.